What's going on, guys? I'm GilloBoiJr and welcome to a quick reading of Animal Crossing Dead Town, which is Creepypasta from the Ordinary Gamers Wiki. Keep it spooky, hope you enjoy the reading. So I once thought nothing scary could ever happen to me, but when I got my hands on an Animal Crossing game, everything had changed. You would think that's just Animal freaking Crossing, and it couldn't have been that scary, but I'm going to tell you my story. No ghosts are involved as far as I can tell, but I could be wrong. It all started harmless enough. But that's often the case, right? I was bored one day and decided to open my 3DS to check out what games were available. As I browsed through the eShop, New Leaf was on the list of popular games. I heard from a friend that Animal Crossing was a great game, so I ultimately decided to buy it. I'm a fan of having a hard copy of games, so I can add it to my literal library of games. So I went out and tried to find a copy of the game. I started at Freddy Myers, as that is an easy place to find some new games, but they were all sold out. I tried Walmart, but they didn't have one either. Was I going to resort to garage sales? No. Too easy to get hacked or a broken game. I went to my last hope, GameStop. I thought of coming here first, but decided against it. As I entered the store, everything was oddly silent. It was completely void of people besides the cashier. When he saw me, he was overjoyed, literally shouting, "Finally, a customer!" before asking what I wanted. We started up a small conversation about games to come out soon. Pikmin 3 to be specific. He said to me that he didn't like the looks of it, but I kept my trusty outlook. It's Pikmin, not much can ruin it. He brought up Pikmin 2, but I told him the only thing it truly lacked at the time was a time limit. After a long discussion, I told him I was looking for Animal Crossing New Leaf, and he seemed to question my judgment. I gave him my reasons, and he went with it. He pointed over to the 3DS games, and I searched for a few minutes, keeping some discussions going with the guy so the silence wouldn't get to either of us. After sifting through the games about 3 times, I told him there wasn't a copy on the shelves. He seemed confused and walked over to check himself. After finding no copies, he told me he would look around behind the counter. He found a single copy, new and untouched. He still seemed confused and told me why. They had gotten new stock in recently enough, and no customers had come in today, so there should have been several copies available. I simply told him that he might have lost count, or maybe the shipment was wrong. He said that was very unlikely, but it does happen sometimes. He got the game, and also gave me an old Jak and Daxter game for the inconvenience. It wasn't that considerate, considering they were having a sale on all PS2 games, each were only $5, but I wasn't about to refuse a game I had recently lost my own copy of. As I got home, I was eager to get started. There was nothing more I wanted than to sit down and play, so I plugged in my 3DS charger, put the game in, and began playing. It was completely normal, I think. I was on a train, a cat person walked up to me, asked my name and where I was going, and let me select the map I wanted to play on. As the train stopped at the town, my character was greeted as the mayor by mistake. I got a massive debt to a raccoon, and I continued the rest of my tutorial. I had paid back the loan on the first day, and my house was scheduled to be completed by the next day. I hated waiting events, so I saved and quit, switched the game's date to the next day, and continued playing. My house was complete, and I got a list full of tasks. I finished them and everything was once again going to continue the next day. At this point, it was a bit late, so I went to sleep. When I got up, I got my 3DS ready and began playing the game again. I did several small tasks and had the day's events completed quickly. At this point I was able to create buildings, and began to work on a fountain. Just before I quit for the day, I noticed that there was another house being built. A new resident was going to move into my town. At this point, I was growing quite fond of my residents, so I honestly couldn't wait until this new guy had moved in. I checked the sign at the front of his plot of land and found that his name was Reaper. Well, I've seen weirder names. The only other interesting event that day was that I got stung by a bee. When I got back to the game the next day, I was surprised to see that Reaper's house wasn't done yet. The only thing there was a door. The weirdest part was that I had the option to go through it. I decided against it. What good would it do to enter a door to nowhere? I continued collecting my money and preparing for the next loan and project. I was soon done and bored, so I saved and quit. It was later that night when I got back to the game. The first odd thing I noticed was that everybody looked a bit sad about something and were gathered around the town centre. They all said the same thing. What happened to him? And I couldn't figure out why. I looked around for my favourite character, Deli, only to find that he was nowhere to be seen. I figured he would be at his house, so I went over, only to find his house in ruin. The roof was collapsed and the door was on the ground in several pieces. The strange thing here was the door looked like it had been slashed apart by some sort of sword or other weapon. I walked around, sad and angry about Deli's house and disappearance. As I passed Reaper's house, I saw that another piece of his house was completed. I couldn't find out what happened to Deli, but I felt he had something to do with it. I did the usual stuff and saved and quit. I had gotten on early the next day to find a new resident that didn't seem to have a house. It was a bit creepy to look at him, as he wore black and frequented Deli's destroyed house. He was also a monkey, like Deli, but his fur was black and his face was red, an odd colour choice for such a normally cheery game. When I tried to talk to him, all he said was Lucy, another resident's name. Lucy was a pig and had a very cheerful attitude. I became worried and ran over to her house. but found out she was fine. I continued my normal routine and found that no progress had been made on Reaper's house. As I saved and quit, I swore I saw the door of Reaper's house open. I started the game again, the next day obviously, and found out shortly that Lucy had disappeared. I quickly ran over to her house to find that her house had completely collapsed. The door was slashed apart. A new character was near her house. This character was just as creepy as the last one at Deli's house, but was completely white and semi-transparent. This character was also a pig, like Lucy. I began connecting the dots, but I wasn't completely sure. As I passed Reaper's house, I noticed more of it had been completed. I knew something was unnatural about this character. I walked around, did the normal things, spoke with the ghost character, who said another character's name, and walked back to Reaper's house. The door was still closed. I watched carefully as I opened the pause menu. Nothing yet. I moved the cursor to save and quit. Still nothing. I pressed the button, and the moment the screen began fading to black, the door had opened and something poked its head out for a split second before the screen went to black. I immediately loaded up the game again and went to find the character the ghost spoke about. As I reached the house, I noticed, in the corner of my screen, a robed figure. The moment it saw me, it bolted. I followed it and ran to Reaper's house, into the door, and the door slammed shut. I figured I'd saved the day, so I quit and felt at ease. This time, everybody seemed scared by something. I went to each character's house and all of them were fine besides the victims. Reaper's house had absolutely no changes, but I felt as if I was in danger there. When I went to the town centre, I found the tree had burned down. The charred black bark of the tree seemed to be some sort of death threat. I wasn't really scared, just angry. I was angry that whatever it was thought it could threaten me. I walked to the town hall and continued the normal routine, and to my surprise, Isabel was perfectly normal. Maybe the town hall was a safe haven from all these weird things. I went about my business as usual, and quit the game. I got on again to find that my house was destroyed and my character was now the same as the other ghostly characters. My character wouldn't move, so I quit and restarted as a new character. Even as I did, weird things were happening. The cat asked where I was going, but the moment I told him, he asked why I would want to go to that cursed place. He suggested that I change my mind, to which I said no. As my character got off the train, he was greeted by a robed figure who said nothing. He walked away, and I walked around, noting the destroyed houses. When I saw Isabel walking around, I knew something was wrong. Isabel doesn't leave the town hall, even if I think she should. Isabel was my favourite character because of her attitude towards her work and helping the mayor. She seemed absolutely heartbroken when I saw her. When I spoke to her, she would only ask why the mayor had to die. I ran over to Reaper's house and found that it wasn't only closest to completion, it was actually complete. I walked inside and saw the corpses of each character that had died. Deli was impaled and hung up on the wall, Lucy's limbs were cut off and she was laying on the ground, and the mayor, well, he was all over the place, literally. His limbs were hung up on the wall, hanging from the ceiling, his eyes were on a nearby table, and his head was in the corner. I was horrified. The robed person walked into the room. He only said one thing to me. "Do you like my decorations?" I caught them all myself. I wanted to get out of there, but Reaper was in the way. Each time I would try to leave, he would reply with, "Leaving so soon? The party's only just begun." Out of desperation, I went into my inventory and found it filled with only one type of item. It was some sort of Japanese spiritual seal. I quickly used it. My character threw it onto the robed person, who immediately disappeared with a scream. I walked outside and immediately threw the seals all over my house. Once I did, I didn't feel like I was in danger anymore, but my heart was pounding. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I relayed the story to my neighbours. Whenever I mentioned Reaper, they got all fidgety. The old man in the neighbourhood brought me over to an old house covered in paper slips. He told me they got a neighbour who liked to be called Reaper. After his arrival, 3 people in town went missing. Their houses destroyed, one of which was the mayor. After that, the police found him and arrested him, but he disappeared afterwards, and people became nervous. They immediately put seals on that house. Each person put a new seal on it for each time they had any encounter that reminded them of him. The old man then handed me a seal. Thanks for listening, guys. I'm GilloBoiJr. Hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, please like and subscribe. There'll be a playlist on the screen as always right now for Creepypasta Storytime. Check them out, they're really good. Bye bye now.